Today's going to be the first video in a series looking at one of my favorite watch brands out there, Laco 1925. And today's watch that we're going to look at is the Augsburg, which I think you can make a strong case for being the best Flieger watch you can get for around $400. Let's take a look. Hey everyone, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch. And like I said, today we're going to be taking a look at this watch, the Augsburg from Laco 1925. And this is, actually I got this watch because I won an Instagram contest and got, it was like a 200-pound discount on a watch. So I wound up purchasing this one from Laco, so I was really excited about that. And after I won, Laco reached out to me and they realized that I had a YouTube channel, and they asked if I wanted to also borrow some other watches, take a look at and do some comparisons. So they were very gracious to lend in some other ones. So I also have some of their higher priced watches to take a look at as well. So this is going to be the first video. We're going to be taking a look at this one. I also have, I think it's the Westerland and Paderborn, which are from their Pilot's Watch Originals line, and we'll be taking a look at those next, and then maybe doing a direct comparison video as well. So stay tuned. I'm kind of excited about this because, like I said, Laco 1925 is one of my favorite brands out there, and I think if you're into affordable watches, they're a really cool brand because they're one of the few ones that have a really high amount of heritage and history behind them that sell watches in this kind of sub $500 price range. Laco was one of the original manufacturers for the German Air Force back in World War II. And as you guys know, if you guys are into aviation history or pilot's watches, you know that the German Flieger design is one of the most influential and popular watch designs in history. Laco was one of the original manufacturers that manufactured, particularly, I think they pioneered the Type B dial Flieger. The one we're looking at today is a Type A dial Flieger. And even though the Laco name has changed hands a number of times, they continue to produce their watches in Germany, really relying on the designs of the past, and in some ways taking some nice little modern improvements. For their Pilot's watches, two of their main lines are the Pilot's Watch Basic and the Pilot's Watch Original. The Augsburg is part of the Basics line, and so this is kind of their budget line. The Basics line uses Miyota movements primarily, and they use some shared components between a lot of the watches in those lines to kind of cut down on the costs. And they generally have just a little bit, a step below what the Pilot's Watch Originals offers in terms of quality and components. The Pilot's Watch Originals line, that one is like a really faithful recreation of the original World War II era Pilot's watches with some modern upgrades like sapphire crystals and Swiss Superluminova. So it's like a better version of what you would have gotten back in the 1940s. But even at their basics level, I think the watches that they offer for this price range are really compelling. You get really high quality finishing, and the design is probably my favorite part. The design details are just really spot on, and they're really high quality watches. I think a lot of times from a distance, maybe it's harder to tell the difference between them and a lower quality watch. But when you get in your hands and you get to play around with them a little bit, when it gets down to the details, they really nail that. And it just, the Laco watches that I've had in my hands and in my collection, I don't know, they just seem to have a little bit higher level of finishing and refinement to them than a lot of other watches in this price range. So one of the things I want to do in this video is also give you guys some size comparisons between the different sizes that are out there, and give you the information you need to maybe help you choose between the different models that are offered in Laco's basic line, or to kind of make a comparison if you want to go for the basic line or try and save up and get something from the more premium Pilot's Watch Originals line. So we'll be looking at some size comparisons to different Laco watches in this line. In this case, I got the 39mm, which I was very interested to try out. I've tried out the 42mm case before, and I love that size. 42mm is one of my favorite sizes for my wrist, but I wanted to try the 39 because I was really kind of trying to decide between that. I've been interested in trying slightly smaller case sizes, and I think 39mm is a really interesting one, and I've been really happy with how this actually wore, so I'm excited to try that out as well. Before we go any further, I want to stop and talk a little bit about the movement on this watch, because that's one thing that's kind of a little bit of a controversial choice. The retail price of the watch is $410, and inside they're giving you a Miyota 821A movement. Now, Miyota movements tend to be more entry-level movements. You typically don't see them on watches up in this price range, especially if you're looking at micro brands. So that's probably going to be the biggest hesitation that a lot of people are going to have with this. To me, it's not as big a deal, and primarily one of the biggest changes I think has happened in this that's kind of changed my mind is that Miyota has begun to upgrade specifically the 821A movement. The 821A used to be a non-hacking movement. It had hand winding but not hacking. Recently Miyota has begun manufacturing a newer version that has hacking added to it, and this watch that I got from Laco, I was really surprised that it has hacking, because I previously, when I bought my Casablanca from Laco last year, it did not have hacking, and that was one of the big disappointments that I had about it. So this one, now that it does have hacking, I think that really makes it a lot easier to swallow, having the Miyota 821A in this watch at this price range. It's still kind of in transition. So when I talked to Laco about that, they confirmed that, yeah, going forward, they're going to be offering it with the upgraded movement, but some of their stock that they still has the older movement inside of it. So if you just directly order from them without saying anything, it's kind of a dice roll whether you're going to get a hacking or non-hacking version. But they said if you add a note to the order and let them know, they'll make sure to send you the hacking version if that's an important feature to you. So I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in getting this watch, that when you order, that you do order it directly from them, and that you ask them for the version with hacking added to it, and you should be able to get that from them without any problem. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that I like about this watch in a little bit closer detail. Okay, so here we have the Augsburg 39 up close. You can see you get a very simple, classic Type A Flieger dial design with the Laco logo in the middle of the dial. So, really simple design there, but that really does help with the legibility. This is one of the most legible dial designs out there. You get really crisp printing on there as well. Laco does a great job on their dials. And then the hands also just very cleanly cut and classic. That is a loomed second hand as well, so it's a white second hand, but it is fully loomed, which you'll see in the Lume shot, which is also really cool to see that thing sweeping around there. You also notice on the second hand it's got kind of a cool little cutout counterbalance it all contrasts very nicely with the black background. One thing that I'm not a huge fan of on this particular one is the tint on the paint. So it's got a little bit of a greenish hue to it. I'd prefer it was more stark white to give it more contrast against the dial, but it's definitely not a deal breaker there. The case is very nice. It's got a nice brushed finish on it. And the lugs have a nice little curvature to them, and they don't stick out very long as well. So the watch wears very comfortably on the wrist. I love the kind of ornate crown that they have on here. Just a really cool crown. And it's kind of cool how you can see how the bezel just sort of comes around and gets completely flush with the rest of the case. Just really nice, tight design there. On the back, you can see they have a display case back showing you that Miyota 821A movement. And again, this one is a hacking movement. So let me show you guys that, which typically you don't get. So on a Miyota 821A, usually if you pull the crown out, the second hand will continue moving and you won't be able to set it synchronized. But with the new versions of it going from here forward, you should start to see this more and more where you actually get hacking included, as well as hand winding. So pretty full-featured movement. The only downsides to this movement is, occasionally Miyota movements do have a little bit of a stutter to them, so they're not quite as smooth of a sweep. And that rotor, as you guys saw, it does spin a lot, and sometimes you can feel that on the wrist. But it is a fairly accurate movement. This one I was getting about plus 12 seconds a day. Very solid movement overall. So, as far as reliability goes, it's a great choice. But, again, typically you would find a nicer movement inside the watch. But I do think that the rest of the components that they've included in here really make up for that. And just overall, it's a great package that they've put together. Another thing that I really like on this one is the strap. You're getting this kind of classic pilot's watch style strap, which is very thick and padded, feels very sturdy, but has a nice smooth feel to it. It's not overly stiff. It wears very comfortably. You're getting the two rivets on there. One thing that was interesting that I kind of thought I didn't really realize is that on the 39 millimeter version, this strap is an 18 millimeter strap. So I would have, normally you find about a 20 millimeter strap in this size. So that strap is fairly narrow for this size case. And, I think I would have preferred a 20 millimeter just because it's easier to swap straps in and out. You have, typically more 20 millimeter straps than 18 millimeter ones. However, one of the interesting things that does, pilots' watches were originally very large watches and meant to be so that they could, be easily legible. And I think having a sort of smaller strap on here sort of gives it the illusion that the watch is bigger than it is. So it wears like a 39 millimeter watch. But I think because the strap is a little bit smaller than usual, it kind of just optically makes the watch head look a little bit bigger, which maybe gives you a little bit more of that feel of like a traditional Flieger. So that, I thought that was kind of a cool effect that they had on here. But overall, as far as, quality and just specs and the design and everything, I think this is definitely one of the highest quality Fliegers you can get in this $400 price range. I think just it's just a classic, really well done, German Flieger watch. You can see that, made in Germany down on the dial. So they're giving you that, proud heritage that they have in there. And again, to be able to find something like this in this sort of $400 price range is fairly rare. I don't think you have, any other options that I can think of, particularly not anything that has this kind of a heritage with it. Next up, we're going to do a Lume test, and we'll primarily be comparing this to some other watches from Laco's line, but also throw in some of the watches in my collection that I use in Lume tests a lot to kind of give you some fair points of comparison. So the Lume on the Augsburg is actually really good. It's here on the left here, and then on the right we have the Laco Westerland, which is their Pilot's Watch Original, which costs about 3 times as much as the Augsburg. Both have excellent lume. As you can see, I really love that lume secondhand. Just looks so cool in the dark to see it sweeping around. And, compared to other watches in my collection, it does great. But don't just take my word for it. Let's go ahead and throw it up against a couple of other watches. As usual, I've got my SWC Diver here on the left, Citizen Nighthawk, and then we've got the Laco Casablanca with a fully lume dial, followed by the Augsburg in the middle there, and then on the far right we have the Westerland and Paderborn 2 Pilot's Watch Originals. Now if we rank these up looking at their hand brightness and their marker brightness, we can see that the Augsburg comes in 4th place in both of those rankings. Both really strong showings, again, in some pretty good company there. The Pilot's Watch Originals watches that come in around $1,300, particularly the Westerland, really shines in these tests, and so I was really impressed with the lume that they put on there. But even on their basics level watches, you're still getting really strong lume, so definitely a plus there. All right, and before we wrap up, let's go ahead and do a size comparison and see how this watch, especially the 39 millimeter, wears on my 7.5-inch wrist compared to some of the other watches in this series and from other series that Laco offers. So I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and so here from left to right, I've got the Laco Augsburg in 39 millimeters, the 42 millimeter Laco Casablanca, which shares the exact same case as the Augsburg, and then on the far right we have the 45 millimeter Westerland from Laco's Pilot's Watch Originals line. So you can see how these wear. The 39 millimeter was one I wanted to try out. My Casablanca is 42 millimeter, so I was kind of always curious how the slightly smaller 39 millimeter would wear, and I think it fits okay. I think my preference would be for the 42 millimeter, but I think I could definitely pull off the 39 millimeter, and there are some benefits to that as well. I was really surprised at how well the 39 millimeter did wear on my wrist. I found it really comfortable and just really kind of unobtrusive. Fit on there really good, and I thought it was just a really great kind of compromise between like really good everyday wearability and then still getting that same style of the of the Type A Flieger. I think maybe especially if I was going for the Type B Flieger, I'd probably want the larger dial because that one has a little bit more intricate printing. But a Type A is such a simple dial that even at the smaller size, it's extremely legible. And again, I was really happy with the size of it, 39 millimeter. It's kind of cool to be able to try both of them out. So I think I could kind of go for either one. 42 is probably closer to what my preference would typically be, though. All right, let's talk the pros and cons of the Laco Augsburg. On the pro side, the first one, I think you're just getting a really great overall design, particularly the case design on this one is really comfortable. It's a nice kind of modern streamlined case design, really nice finishing and really comfortable to wear on the wrist. In fact, I think this more modern case design actually wears better than the much more expensive Pilot's Watch Original, because the original goes back to the case design that they used back in the 1940s, which wasn't really meant for everyday use so much as for use in the military. So totally different use case. But because because of that, because they were able to take more liberties on the basic line, this is just a great, really wearable everyday watch, especially in the 39mm size. Along with that, though, you are getting the insanely great legibility that a pilot's watch offers. So just completely clean design, really easy to see. And then part of that is the Lume, which is top-notch, especially in this price range. Finally, this watch is made in Germany, which typically comes at a premium in manufacturing, and the benefit to that is you hopefully get a better level of quality control and just a higher level of craftsmanship that you would get in the German sector, and that seems to be the case from everything I've seen from the Laco watches that I've had the privilege of trying out. Cons to this watch, again, that Miyota movement. In this price range, you can usually get much better movements from other brands, but that's just a little bit of a trade-off that you got to make. Again, Laco being made in Germany, having this kind of level of heritage, there are some additional costs involved, and I think overall it's worth it, but that's something to keep in mind. And the only other con that I had with this watch was, again, the kind of greenish hue to the printing. I would have preferred a more white paint, and I know there's some Lume that you can get. It'll give you bright Lume with a white paint in the daylight. In fact, the Pilot's Watch original has more of that color to it, so I would have preferred that, but it's not really a deal breaker to me on that level either. Overall, I think this is a great watch, particularly for people who are interested in heritage. If you're starting to, if you're in the budget price range and you want a watch that has a lot of heritage, it's hard to find a better watch, I think, than this one, especially if you have an interest in aviation or aviation history, because this is, a really easy, low cost of entry way to get into that segment of the market, and it's just a great everyday watch on top of it. So really appreciate this watch. I really enjoyed getting to wear it and to try it out. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. As always, if you guys have any experiences with Laco, what your impression of them are, or how they might compare to some of the other original German manufacturers, because they're in some pretty good company. If you go back to the other aviation companies or the other watch companies that were manufacturing these German Air Force watches, you've got the likes of like IWC and Stova, which typically come in at much higher price ranges. So to get something with this similar level of heritage at this price, I think is really great. Anyways, that'll wrap it up for today. We'll talk to you guys later, and thanks for watching. Bye.